On my behalf, I will try to be as brief as possible, and my introductory narrative will be an address to all the others who will be taking the floor following my presentation. You can see the agenda. The moderators are Maria and myself. We'll have two panels and an introduction to each panel. The introduction will be made by representatives of our partnering organizations. They are researchers in the field of migration and integration. We will not be speaking abundantly today. The stakeholders will be taking the floor today because they come from Bulgaria, but they also come from other countries that we partner with, and they will be taking the floor to share their experience with what they do. They come from bigger countries and then smaller countries that have different degree of advancement in the integration processes. And to start, I will tell you a few words about our initiative that officially will be finalized this week with this conference. The name of our initiative is RACCOMBAT, comes from racism and combat. It deals with integration of foreigners through social orientation, because we believe this serves as means for prevention of racism, xenophobia, and intolerance. This initiative was spanned over 22 months. We had partners from 6 member states. It was a consortium that we were presiding over. We from the Center for Study of Democracy, Pro Refugio was one of the partners, the Constitutional Law Center from Greece, from Providus from Latvia, then fourthly the Antwerp Migration Study Institute from Belgium, and also, last but not least, the Human Rights University Center from Graz, Austria. But we were able to study the experience of several other member states: Estonia, Lithuania, Cyprus, the Netherlands, Portugal, and Germany, and their social integration centers. Details are uploaded on the site of our initiative that you will see as a final slide. Our initiative, as I said, continued for 22 months and had 4 stages: study, research stages, and practical stages. We made an overview of the systems for social orientation in this broader list of countries that are listed in the first bullet, and then we performed an analysis of the legal elements therein, to what extent the schemes available for social orientation are able to provide practical tools for integration and inclusion of refugees and migrants. And then we collected good practices from all partnering states and from other countries as well. And we ended up by elaborating guidelines for including tolerance in every stage of the integration of migrants and refugees. We also carried out trainings in all the partnering countries, and we've gathered here today at this event because it's the final event of our initiative. Now, within the review, when I explain about the review and the analysis, I will tell you what the conclusions were for Bulgaria, mainly because I believe that they will be most interesting for our audience, but I will pass the floor to colleagues from other countries to tell you about the conclusions for their countries as well. You know that in Bulgarian legislation there are provisions for obligations and rights, but mostly for those who seek asylum. There are several others for the integration regulation, but more or less they're on paper only. There are not regular or systematic modules for social orientation mission to focus on what we focused, but you will hear what the initiatives are. There are initiatives related to initial adaptation that are organized by the Bulgarian Refugee Agency. There are projects that are financed with different tools, and there are also the efforts of different NGOs, Bulgarian language courses, information sessions, festivals, etc., various other initiatives that we will hear about today. There are other initiatives related to people who are seeking and receiving protection, but they're more or less for the social workers from different municipalities and not for the foreigners themselves. And in our analysis, we made a conclusion that foreigners have a number of unmet expectations for information mostly, and information should be delivered systematically, regularly in the format of courses and modules that provide for their orientation. Now, within the overview of the systems for social orientation, we've given different examples, we believe useful examples from other member states, and my colleagues from other member states will talk about this in details, and we will see that in different other countries, the social orientation courses have different target groups. Those who have been seeking and receiving international protection, but also foreigners coming through other various channels, and also citizens of our member states. Our colleagues will tell you that citizens of the member states also participate in different courses because they too have to be prepared to be able to be part of a successfully receiving society. It's good that there are other responsible institutions. In Bulgaria, the focus is on municipalities, and in Romania, for example, the main institution is the Ministry of Interior. In Latvia, it's the Ministry of Culture, and also in other agencies that deal with migration and integration. What we believe is very valuable, something that has to happen in Bulgaria, but still, first of all, conceptually, is that along with practical information of how we in Bulgaria live, many of the integration systems they are based on big, voluminous papers and documents that have been compiled by teams of university professors or practitioners, and in them, they are the foundation documents and papers that indeed say that social orientation should provide practical information, but also values that lie in the constitution, intercultural contact information. And these elements of the integration system are conceptual. It's a good foundation. But still, it's on paper and not practically available. The guidelines for further development of the integration systems, guidelines that we can surely avail of, we listed as a first priority. First of all, we need guidelines for concept of projection of the route that every migrant has to go, has to take, wherein social orientation, career orientation should be part of, and my colleagues will be later on talking about this. We have representatives from Austria and Belgium, wherein the social orientation systems are much more advanced. It's good that we were able to list a number of mentorship programs, and we are on the right track in Bulgaria, and Latvia and Portugal also have good examples of this. And then the ubiquitous coverage of the one-stop shop element is also extremely important because, as we discussed previously, the administrative burden is much relieved for Bulgarians and for newcomers from other countries, foreigners that come. This is something good. It's good to be able to provide different services as a one-stop shop service because they will not have to go many places to get one service done. We also discussed the financing in different member states, whether and what is sufficient or not sufficient. But we discuss how what format it takes, whether from the national budget or from different grants or co-financing or other. You will also hear that occasionally in different member states there are exams that are organized both for languages and for basic social requirements and expectations in the Netherlands. And there are even more sophisticated systems, such as the one in Belgium. You will hear about it later today. The analysis of legal instruments, legal elements, made us conclude on several major things. First of all, we said that social orientation and teaching rights and obligations should become a priority of the interinstitutional bodies that get together to coordinate the migration and integration processes. And different authority and rights and obligations of all institutions should be formulated. The State Refugee Agency, the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Education and Science, the Ministry of Interior, and many other institutions that are represented here today, because every stakeholder has their own important role in a good integration process. We also gave a recommendation for more explicit and clear provisions in the integration regulation, because it is not enough to mention that the foreigner should abide by their rights and obligations. We need to also state therein who will teach this foreigner what their rights and obligations are, and who will observe and monitor that they later on do what expected. Connections should be sought for, as Mr. Leroux said. We need to also reach out to the secondary education and the higher education systems, because we need to educate students and school children on what tolerance means, what mutual respect means, because thus the connection, the bridge will be much more logical. We will be able to educate Bulgarian citizens, adults as well. We need to also stipulate the instructions for the Bulgarian language exam, because it does not only cover language skills, but also skills in social life in Bulgaria. They are lacking. Then civil education in tolerance should be included in the adaptation sessions that are carried out in the State Refugee Agency. And with regard to the anti-discriminatory bodies, the police and the related, because we tend to think of them as something separate, we need to change the mindset. We will hear from the discussions today, and we'll hear from the experience of other member states. There should be special guidelines on how they work with foreigners and migrants, because what we discovered was that they're not prepared sufficiently to protect the rights of a vulnerable community, such as foreigners and migrants, to the fullest. And we will hear about good practices, both from Bulgaria and from other countries. We've prepared a subjective selection of these examples. They're quite diverse, actually, and you can read all about them in this grey book. We will speak about houses of bread and their events, and we will also hear about detailed articles and publication on the topic of social orientation and integration that are often paid. They are carried out in the Netherlands, but we also Vienna, Weichensteldert from Austria is a great example. We will hear about this before lunch break. We will hear about different NGO initiatives in all of our partnering countries, but also in the other countries whose experience we studied. A factor that unites us all among these diverse good practices is something that can be formulated as a conclusion. And the conclusion is that there is a constructive, beneficial, fruitful partnership between agencies, institutions, and NGOs, because nobody should be left outside the integration, but also that we can see that there is political will for social integration, because this is, along with all other, a political process. In order to be able to prepare migrants for a good life in the receiving society, there should be, by all means, political will. Description of our good practices, photo examples, and illustrations you can see on the website of our RACCOMBAT initiative. Examples for good practices are given on this slide. The Start Vienna induction days, Cyprus example, also the bakeries, the bread houses that we will hear about this afternoon, and the guidelines that are also included in your grade books. There are several conceptual issues that are therein formulated, and we drafted them together with our partners from other organizations. They will say a few words as part of their presentations. We spoke about the need, we discussed the need on including tolerance and mutual respect issue in every stage and format of the integration process, because usually even experts ask, what can we say about the basic rights, say in the format of a language course? Is this not simply a language course? Well, no, it's not merely a language course. In Bulgaria, even in Bulgaria, when we carry out these language courses, we have examples of teaching not only language but also safety rules, health issues, so even interaction with the police authorities, what the foreigners should do, where and how. We also discussed the models that are governed by the state and governed by the NGOs. We know that there are initiatives and models that are state government-oriented. There are principles, instructions, and guidelines and programs that are adopted from top to bottom, from the government to downwards. And as in Bulgaria, we have the NGO model. We spoke also about tolerance and mutual respect as part of the crisis intervention. This was much developed by our partners from Greece. Mrs. Konstantinos will speak about this in a few minutes' time. And we spoke of teaching basic rights as part of the established integration systems. And we will hear our colleagues from Belgium speaking about this. We also included a chapter on tolerance and mutual respect as part of language training and the culture orientation training. Colleagues from Latvia will speak about this, and next teaching skills of what the basic rights are as part of other institutions' works. Colleagues from Romania will take over to tell us about this. And last but not least, the conclusions and the recommendations. And I will tell you what they are to see if there's any feedback from you. Guidelines, recommendations. I'm not only asking questions now. Hopefully there will be answers. And the first question is whether or not all integration functions should be vested in the state, or some of them should be carried out by NGOs. What is the work of the state and what is the work of NGOs? Pushed by different factors, is the country, is the state ignoring the significance, the importance of their role, and should it all go to NGOs or not? And what functions should be transferred over to NGOs, naturally substantiated with good financing, and what activities are the NGOs more fit to carry out? Another question is, how can we teach basic rights along with other rights and needs of foreigners? Now, we are past this issue in Bulgaria, but several years ago we've been asking this question. What is the algorithm? We need to first accommodate foreigners, to take care of their health and education, their children next, and then their job. And where should we include basic rights in this complicated, sophisticated process? Another question, within the framework of now established integration system, and our colleagues from Belgium asked this question, how can we provide for credible information on a case-by-case basis? Because it turns out that basic rights issues can get lost among all other issues: social orientation, education, healthcare, and occasionally the basic rights are not sufficiently paid attention to. Another question is, how can we, as part of the language courses and culture orientation, how can we avail of the fact that there are always language courses? Can we use this, that language courses are always available for foreigners? Can we teach rights and obligations within the format of language courses? And can we integrate, last but not least, the issue of fundamental rights in the work and courses provided by other institutions? Yesterday even, we discussed another question. Can the police be involved in the integration processes and teaching integration of foreigners? Is the work of the police only reactive, or can it be included even earlier in this process? Those are the questions that we've been asking all along, and their information is uploaded on all these three sites in our Center for Study of Democracy. You can find all the materials or documents related to the initiative. Thank you very much for your attention. We move on to the presentation of the first panel, and there will be a Q&A session right after the end of the first panel.